Welcome, everybody. My name is Todd Rhoades. I'm one of the co-founders at Chemistry Staffing, and along with me today, I'm happy to have Matt Steen, who's our co-founder here at Chemistry Staffing as well, and Kelly Norris, who is our Director of Strategic Initiatives. Say hi, Kelly.
Hello.
And Holli Lehman, who is our recruitment manager here at Chemistry Staffing. And what we want to share today is some of what we found from our pretty, I think, massive assessment that we did, national study. We called it our 2023 Church Staff Health Assessment. And let me just give you just a really brief kind of background as to what we did. We ended up with over 1,000, about 1,063 exactly, actually 1,063 respondents to our survey. It included a wide variety of different churches, sizes, denominations, age ranges, locations all over the United States, but these are all U.S. based churches, full and part-time staff. And we asked, if you took the assessment, the format of it, but we asked really 50 questions or statements requiring an answer of 1 to 5. So if you answered 1 on any one of those questions, it would be like a strongly disagree, a 3 would be a neutral, a 5 would be strongly agree. So we compiled all of those answers from those over 1,000 respondents, and we found out some really interesting things. We're going to share a few of those today, but we found some really interesting things in 7 major categories: communication, church staff job satisfaction, leadership, team dynamics, compensation and benefits. We're going to talk about that today a little bit, work environment, and future stability. And really what we wanted to do with this assessment, particularly with everything that's happened in the last 3 years coming out of a major pandemic, is we wanted to find out, so how healthy are church staff? And then the follow-up question is, how healthy are church staff really? We came away with 17 significant findings, really dozens, probably dozens and dozens of minor points of interest as well. We're going to share kind of 4 of the significant findings that we had today on this webinar. And just so you know, because I know we always get this question, there will be a recording of this afterwards, and we will send that to you because you're here. You'll automatically get that recording as well. And then if you would like to, we'll have a graphic that comes up that will send you directly to the link. But if you would like to download the full, what is it, like Kelly, like 45, 48 pages, the full PDF report of our findings, that will be available to you at chemistrystaffing.com/staff-health. So we'll send you that link as well. And the last bit of housekeeping here before we get started is absolutely we're going to take your questions, as many questions as we can fit in. We're going to try and take toward the end of today's webinar. You've got a little chat area and a question and answer pane there as well that you can send in some questions. Please do that, and we would love to answer your questions as many as we can get to at the end. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. I want to share the first major finding that we had that I thought was really interesting. And this is, if you look at the whole assessment that we did and you do a 30,000 foot overview on overall church staff health, here's what we found. Okay, 52% of all the staff, those 1,063 that answered, 52% kind of ranked in the exceptional, strong, or excellent. Okay, you've got the stats there on your screen, but let me share them and then I'll kind of give you a little bit of analysis and then we'll unpack that a little bit. 52% actually exceptionally strong, excellent. Okay, 24% came into the good category, and then another 24% overall. When we just took all those 50 questions and put all the answers and determined how everybody's really doing, about 24% fell into that fair, or needs improvement, or in the critical. Okay, so let me just break that down really quickly. 52% sounds really good. And if you add, and it's not a horrible number, but if you add the 52 and the 24, you could say that, if my math is right, like 76% are either good or strong or healthy or exceptional. But breaking it down to the 52%, those are really, if you're leading a staff, those 52%, we call them your green lights. They're your good to goes, right? They're the people that are thriving. They're the people that are doing really, really well. Those are the people that are bought in, and they're gonna stick with you for a good amount of time here. The 24%, those goods, that's good, right? But these are also the neutrals. These are the ones that, and we'll get to that when we talk a little bit about future stability and job satisfaction in just a few minutes. The 24% are the neutrals. They can be swayed. They can be swayed of either up, so that they're out of that good range and into the exceptional and strong and excellent category, or they can be swayed down. They're right there in the middle. These are on the 1 to 5 scale. These are the 3s, right? So the good are good, but they can go up or down. And then the 24% that are fair, that or need improvement or are critical, those are the ones that we categorize them as at risks. Okay, so these are the ones that you really need to try and move up to good to get them into a good level, at least. But these are the ones that are at risk. And if you're going to have people that leave your staff or roll off your staff, these are going to be the people that are looking at other jobs. These are going to be the people primarily that are open to leaving your current staff. So let's unpack this a little bit, guys. Matt, let me ask you, anything surprise you here? Is this kind of, I mean, we all kind of had preconceptions going into this as to what we thought we'd find. What surprised you in these numbers, these overall numbers?
I'm a recovering executive pastor, so I think gloom and doom on everything. And I was shocked that 52%, that number was as high as it was coming out of it. And I think part of that, Todd, we at chemistry tend to work in some pretty rough situations and focus a lot there. But the fact that 52% is as strong as it is, that's pretty cool, especially considering just the dumpster fire of a train wreck that the last 3 years have been in so many cases with everything that's been going on. So that was really encouraging to me. I needed some of that good news.
Yeah, I was the same way because exactly of what you said, Matt. I think because we're a staffing firm, so we're talking to churches all day long that are hiring people, and we're also talking to candidates all day long that are in the midst of transition. Some of those transitions are good, many of them are not. But so I was encouraged by that 52% number. I wish it was 92% rather than 52%, but I was encouraged by that. Kelly, Holly, anything there stood out to you or surprised you in those numbers?
Yeah, I feel like there's still a long way to go. I don't want to negate the fact that we had some really great results and statistics, but if we're the goods still have some room for growth, and we also have some fair and needs improvement. We're all about church health here at Chemistry Staffing, and so we always want to see those numbers improve. But I echo Matt in saying that I was really happy with the mid 70 percentile of the positive, but it still shows that we have over a quarter people out there that still need to see some growth and improvement. So it's both a encouragement and a challenge for us as church leaders.
Still work to be done.
Yep.
Everywhere too. Holly, did you have something?
I think the team is highlighting it, but truly I think it's exciting. It's exciting to say, hey, 52% are doing really well. But I think it's just as important. That means we've got 48% that we need to your point, Todd, some of them are in that point where they could be swayed. So we need to focus on those as well. and make sure that we're helping them using that 52% as a motivator, that we can get the rest of those people to that greater health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like what Holli and Kelly are both saying, going back to the gloom and doom, because I think as good as the 52% is, I think and we have a tendency to look at 24% being in that middle of the road category, but we talk internally about people being shields down when it comes to a job search. And so that 24% in that good are the people that if somebody comes to them and says, hey, look, I'm looking for a new fill in the blank pastor, is this something that you'd consider? Probably the exceptional, strong, excellent people are going to say, no, I'm good.
Yep.
But the people that are in that good phase are the ones that might be open to that. They're not over, they're open. And so I think we start looking at that bottom 48% and start asking ourselves some questions. How do we bump them up into the next categories? But so thank you.
I agree with that. But I think if we look at, 70%, we're good, let's move on. I think that overall, the findings throughout the report just show the need for continual improvement as a whole. And we can't just say, we're doing well in this area and move on. We've got to be revisiting these things all the time. And so these stats could look very different in a couple of months, depending on how churches respond and what people do in leadership.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig down a little bit deeper. That was the 30,000 foot level. Let's talk about job satisfaction. And what I would like to do is, Matt, share, I'm going to turn this one over to you. Share some of these stats that we found, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper on this one too.
Yeah. So again, this is fairly encouraging, which is exciting. And we needed this kind of breath of fresh air, but we're finding that about 80%, 8 in 10 of our staff members feel like their work is positively impacting the church and community, which is a big deal, right? So much of what we do, we're not in this for the money. So we need to be internally motivated in so many of these things. And so that's really encouraging that people are genuinely seeing that the positive impact from their work. I think where it starts to be a little concerning is we've got about 36% of our staff would say that they're unhappy or neutral when it comes to job satisfaction. Okay. So more than a third of our team is in that place where it's a good team is saying, hey, I'm seeing positive fruit from what I'm doing, but at the same time, I am not really happy about where I am and what my job is. And then the 3 in 10, good 30%, they're not looking forward to coming to work each week. And that's heartbreaking for me. Now, they still are seeing some of the positive fruit from their work. They're seeing impact, but at the same time, they're just like, they just need an extra few minutes when they pull into the church parking lot before they can get out of their car for one reason or another. And that's a little disturbing if we think about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Matt. So this is your area here, so I'm going to throw this back to you. I think it's fascinating. So almost 8 in 10, I think it was like 78%, which is one of the higher, out of all the questions, this was one of the highest agreements, is that church staff members really do feel that they're making a difference and that their work is making a positive impact on their church and community, but yet they can be really happy and feel they can be really positive about the impact, but they can still at the same time be unhappy or even neutral when it comes to their job satisfaction. Unpack that for us. How does that seem like it's conflicting, or what do you make of that?
I lived that. And I think a lot of people that have been in ministry for a while get this. I remember I was a youth pastor for 8 years until I got too old. And I remember just seeing that there was significant impact in the lives of our students, knowing that they were coming to faith, that they were following Jesus, and that was super exciting. But at the same time, the church culture that I was in was probably not the healthiest. And I was getting a little beat up by some of the internal staff dynamics and some of the unhealth of our staff team. But at the same time, I was loving what was going on with students and volunteers. And that, I think we see a good bit of that within the church world, people that are just like, and this is one of those things that we as pastors have to start asking some hard questions. Hey, is God calling me out of here? Is the toll that this is taking on me worth the fruit? But I think that's probably part of what's going on there, is not wanting to step away from where they're seeing God produce fruit in ministry, but at the same time, having a toll being taken on them because of maybe some of the health dynamics of the church culture. I don't know. Am I nuts on that?
I think that makes total sense. And I've been there too, Matt. You feel like, man, I really feel like I'm making a difference. I'm seeing some discipleship happening. I'm seeing some results. I'm seeing the meter move a little bit here.
But man, am I dying inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, some of that is clarity. Excuse me. Some of that is clarity, even from your superiors and all of that. And I hate to use that word. The leadership really needs to have clear communication so that you know that the measuring stick that you're using for your own ministry matches that measuring stick that the leadership expects of you, and how it impacts the greater ministry, the church as a whole. And so some of that is just being in alignment with the leadership, and that communication. I think I shared this with Todd earlier. Communication is just a string that strings all of this stuff together. And I don't believe you can have pure job satisfaction without good communication on the team, with your team members, with your volunteers. And that really impacts job satisfaction overall.
I think this is huge too. We working with candidates every week, and we have these conversations. Okay, you've been in this ministry for X amount of years. Why are you looking? And there's that tension where they're like, I don't know if I should be looking. I have this strong call. I know that God has placed me in ministry and has called me to this. But man, to your point, Matt, I don't want to get out of the car in the parking lot. And so I think that this, while it's not exciting, the stats, I think this is helpful that it's not just one person alone sitting in this situation. This is an area where just across the board, we're seeing a growth opportunity for the church, that opportunity to really help their team. How do they move beyond that? Not just that they feel, okay, God's called me to this, but maybe God has specifically called me to this place, and I don't have to cry on the way to work.
Exactly. I think, of course, I'm me. I think all of this is really fascinating, and I think some of the findings here are just really interesting when it comes to according to what seat you're in. If you're a staff person reading this, maybe there's some parts of this that really resonate with you. But also, if you're like a senior pastor or an executive pastor on a leadership team, some of these findings are going to excite you, and some of these findings, I think, are just going to, I don't want to say scare you, but realize that we're all on this journey, and we've got some real improvements that we need to be making in order to not only make sure that our staff are healthy, but we're going to talk next. And part of job satisfaction, obviously, is compensation. That's just one of the things that if you're not being compensated well, that in and of itself probably won't make you not want to get out of your car, but it definitely is one of the factors. Let's move on to the compensation area and talk about a couple of the findings that we found there. And Kelly, I turned over to you on this one.
All right. It was interesting. On the positive side, we have 58% of church staff who say they're satisfied with their salary and benefits package, which I was a little shocked about, which is great. But that means 42% do not feel satisfied in that area. I think of an election, it's like this tipping point, right? But here's the other fact, and this 59%, it says the annual evaluation process and strategy for compensation analysis needs improvement, according to 59% of church staff. So nearly 60% of church staff say this just needs to be reworked. And I think the level of satisfaction with compensation and benefits has a significant impact on staff motivation and retention. It just does. And I know that kind of bleeds into the next area that we might be talking about, but it all works together. Job satisfaction, communication, all of these things work symbiotically together to help this general health of us. But I do think that leadership that addresses the lack of confidence and clarity and the compensation processes, that improves like motivation, trust, cohesion. All of those things come about as a result of that compensation conversation. And I even think, and I know this kind of goes beyond just the survey itself, but post-pandemic, we're really thinking of ways, okay, if we can't give someone a raise, how else can we compensate them with time off, flexibility, all of these various things that we can do? It doesn't just have to be money alone. But I think that the positive, or the 58%, could get better as a result of just listening to your team and responding to where you're at as a church as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kelly. And this is one of the areas that I don't want to over dramatize this, but I found this a little terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm on a leadership team at a church or on a board at a church, only because of, so according to this, like 42% of your team, if your local church kind of bears the national average, 42% are not overly satisfied with their salary and benefits package. I think there's some reasons for that, and a lot of that is just cyclical, and the culture that what we've been going through as a country financially. There's been a good amount of inflation. There's been a good amount of just, we talked a lot about the Great Resignation and people getting out of ministry and moving on. Compensation is not the only thing that, we just talked about job satisfaction. It's not the only thing that determines job satisfaction, but it's a factor.
Yeah.
It's a factor. So you've got that 58% stat speaks to the financial security of your staff. But then the second one, when it's almost 6 in 10 feel like their church doesn't have any strategy for either annual evaluations, or how do they determine if I get an increase? So that ambiguity feeds into that.
I think the most telling part of probably the most fascinating piece of the whole survey for me was that 59% is just a church staff number. That's scrub. That's not senior pastors, and that's not executive pastors.
Yep.
If you add the senior pastors and executive pastors in, that number goes down by about 20%. And what they're
the ones that have the say.
Yeah. And so what that tells me is that we've got a disconnect between our senior pastors, executive pastors, and our ministry staffers, because our seniors and executives apparently believe that there's clarity on evaluation process, that there's clarity on compensation analysis and all that kind of stuff. Whereas you remove those and all of a sudden that number jumps up another 20 points, man, you've got a disconnect communication wise between senior leadership, potentially elder boards, whatever, and your ministry staffers. And so that for me was probably the most fascinating piece of this entire survey, because of that communication disconnect right there.
Yeah. As a sidebar, I wonder how the new pay transparency coming up might affect this.
Yeah.
In the
You
States,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having a background in HR and finance, both outside of the church and within the church, I think this part, it's interesting because these compensation, performance, they can be touchy subjects, especially within ministry. I think we get nervous. We don't want to have too many processes or too many hard lines, because I think we think that it might hurt our team. But I think that we're seeing the reverse. When there's not that clarity, when there aren't processes and expectations, it's really hard for our team to understand, am I on track? What can I expect? But I think it's just huge. We want to care for our team, and we want to make sure that we're keeping them on our team. So it's really important that we're meeting with them, we're understanding, having that open communication, and making sure that we have an understanding of what they should be being paid, so that we're respecting them in that way as well.
Yep, absolutely.
And even having an open door policy where you can talk about it. It's such a taboo thing. Money seems to be a taboo thing in ministry. And I think a leader can create those clear expectations and open communication about that. It's healthy. Even if the answer is no for a raise, at least you're clear. At least
Yep, absolutely. All right, we got to keep moving here. We could talk about all of these for an hour. At least I could. But let's talk. We said we were going to do 4 of our major findings. We've already done 3. Let's move on to the last one. And Holli, I'm going to throw it to you for this one. But let's talk about future stability. And really what we were talking about when we asked the questions on the assessment about future stability is asking staff members how they felt about their future stability, how they felt about their future in their current role at their current church. So what are some of the things that we found there?
Yeah, sure. So like we said, we've been talking about this. We want to keep people on our team. We want to make sure they're healthy. And so I think that it's great. 53% of our church staff members, it's good to note this, that they've considered leaving their current role in the past year. So just take a moment and let that sink in. This is not necessarily exciting, but good to note that 53%, over half of your staff, has considered leaving in the past year. So that's huge. That's really huge. And not to take you down an even more less exciting path, but it goes deeper. Only 6 in 10 are optimistic about their future in the church. So that means 40% are not. These are stats that, again, not exciting, but I think that it's important for us to realize where our people are at and what the future stability is for them. 42% are unsure about being on their church staff in the same role in 3 years. I think for me, I'm just sitting here going, wow, those are staggering numbers. We see people that are feeling fulfilled within their role, but also they're still looking, they're still having conversations and seeing what else is out there, and might not be wanting to be in their same role in 3 years. And I think it boils down to staff really want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. I think we can all resonate, no matter how many times we've made shifts in our role or looked at other places. It's really not exciting to be job searching. Sometimes it's super stressful. I don't think that people wake up going, oh, I'm really excited to start that process. And so while that's the emotion, these are the facts as far as what people are feeling. So I think at this point, it's just, what can churches do? How can they encourage and convince that 40% to stay?
Yeah, and I would echo this. I've been helping churches in one way, shape, or form find staff members for almost, I'm dating myself here, almost 25 years. And I don't think, Holli, I've ever heard one person say, I can't wait to start a staff search.
Yes.
Either on the church side or the candidate side. Nobody said nobody ever.
Yeah.
Kelly, anything stand out to hear here to you as far as the future stability piece and what we learned?
Yeah, I really think, tongue in cheek here as a church staffing agency, to say we need to be focused on staff retention, right? We need to be caring well for our teammates. And I think some of that, it goes beyond just giving them a gift card and saying, we appreciate you, or patting them on the back. There's more to it than that. And I think staff retention can include clear and open communication, clarity on expectations and their roles and goals and salary. Honestly, like a feedback culture. Feedback culture, we don't do this enough in the church, but just having that safe place to be able to have that feedback culture. The other thing is a growth plan. Growth plans, I think, feed into job satisfaction, compensation, overall health. If they know there's a plan for them in the future, they know that the church is working with them and in tandem to help them get to where they want to be. How much confidence does that instill in the people who are working on staff? And so I think resources and creating safe environments, all of that stuff matters. But I just think it's amazing to see the 53% who have considered leaving. And some of this is low-hanging fruit. We can do some of these things so easily to correct that number. So that it hurt my heart a little bit to see that number, because I think that we need to be doing things better. We're all about people. We're in the people business. We're in the Jesus business, of course, but we're in the people business. We're here to love people. How do we love people in their jobs?
And I think that's huge, Kelly. That open communication, that culture of trust, that's going to help. But I think it's taking it a step further too, as you're learning, okay, what does my team need? What's going to help them? Then making that commitment to your point as far as growth. Okay, let's commit to continuing to learn, to continue tackling those challenges and finding those creative solutions, not just, okay, we found out what they need and let's throw that away, but let's actually grow together and see what we can do to help get our team to the next level.
Yeah, this isn't a check the box either, right? This is a continual massaging, continual.
It would be great if you could just check the box and be done with it, wouldn't it?
None of this is checking boxes.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think here?
So two big things come to mind. One is just to circle back to something that Kelly said is about having a career plan, right? One of the biggest things that we've noticed just in the change in ministry the last 3 years has been, if you want to retain your younger staff, you need to sit down with them and start to develop what does their career trajectory look like. And that's not something that when I was coming up, back in the day, we didn't have those conversations. But one of the big changes generationally, if you want to retain your team, is you've got to sit down with them and say, hey, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? It may be here, it may not be here, but man, I'm going to help develop you into that role. And you get the benefit of the doubt that way. People stick around longer. And the upside of that is you potentially have somebody ready to step into a role if there's a vacancy. And the downside is you send somebody out trained to go to expand the kingdom based on the work that you've done in them. And so that career trajectory piece is so much more important now than it's ever been when it comes to retaining staff. The other piece of this that I don't know that we've touched on a whole awful lot, but it's near and dear to my heart right now, is I am curious, and we don't have the firm numbers on this to be able to say for sure, but I look at the 42%, the 40% that aren't optimistic about their future, and the 53%. And I'm also looking at this coming wave of succession, because I think we know that the average age of a pastor is mid-50s right now. I think Ministry Watch just did a report where 90% or 91% of ministry leaders that they surveyed were over age 50. I think there's some of this is going to be that wave of people that are getting ready to retire and are thinking about what that next season looks like. And if the rest of the numbers don't scare you, that should, because here's a stat: 1 out of every 1 people dies. And there will be a day when you are going to step out of your ministry role, and your church needs to be ready to restock that. And so some of those numbers are related to unhappiness in a role, feeling a call to something different. But I think some of it is also just related to the fact that we are aging as ministry leaders. And for many of us, our time in our church and in our ministry roles is coming to an end, and we need to start evaluating, figure out what our next season looks like. So I don't know if that's happy news or sad news.
And I do think that if you think about it, the end result in mind, as we're building health in the church, if the lead pastor, let's say they're starting to age out, this should be that much more important. Leaving your church healthier. Yes. One of our family values is leaving something better than you found it, right? And so we need to be leaving the church better than we found it. And so creating some of the health within job satisfaction and compensation and future stability, when you do finally have either a succession plan or you step aside or retire, you have some built-in health for that next minister to come and be set up for success. And I just think that we need to be not just thinking in our bubble, but thinking for the future of our churches.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop the slide presentation here. One of the things that I'd love to have you guys do, if you haven't done it already, and I'm going to try and put this up, it should hopefully show up in your chat window there, I think, which is just the link. You can click that download now link, and that will take you to a link on our website where you can actually download the full report. So believe me, we've just scratched the surface here in the short amount of time that we've had, is to unpack some of the really high level, but we've done 4, and there are 17 kind of major findings that we identified from this church staff health survey. So I'm going to go ahead and push that out to you so you can see that now as well. And now what we would love to do is take some of your questions. Some of you have asked some questions. We'll get to some of those. We have just a few minutes to do that because we were long-winded today. So first of all, somebody asked what levels of staff took the assessment, and I can take that one because that's an easy one. If you download the full report, you're going to get more of a breakdown as far as what positions and how many percentages. These are all full or part-time staff people, but we have senior pastors, executive pastors. We've got worship and kids and youth and facilities managers and administrative assistants. And we do in the report break down some of the things specifically for the different roles, but if you do the download, you'll be able to get that. All right, let me pull a couple of these questions here, and we'll just throw it out to the group here and see what we come up with here. Roger says, what's the best way to approach decision makers with compensation improvement issues? Kelly, I'm gonna pick on you and throw it to you because you had talked a little bit about creating a kind of a DNA and culture where you can actually have these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Some churches are really open in this, and other churches are like, man, that's like the kiss of death if you mention compensation. What would you say to Roger about if you're a staff member, you need to start the conversation? How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you're a senior leader, you need to start reevaluating your compensation within your church. And if that means getting some outside help, there are people, we even do some consults with compensation just to help you reframe that, bring some boundaries to it, some runways, if you will, to help frame that out, to make it a little more formal and structured, and even planning for the future. I think having the conversation, if you feel safe, and that's not always the case in churches, if you feel safe to have those conversations with your pastor, sometimes it's just a matter of having the conversation. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't look up what your neighbor has or what a a fellow staff member has in another state and say, hey, they're getting paid this. I think I should be getting paid this. You have no idea typically what you're getting within the framework of your church. And so you may be getting paid really well based upon those values. But having an open conversation, if you feel safe, is the best way to go. Just saying, hey, do we have plans for the future? Can we talk about the future of my role here at the church, what that means? And then it's not just about them giving you a raise. It's, am I meeting that measuring stick that I talked about earlier? Do our measuring sticks match? Am I meeting those expectations that you want me to have? And what's our plan for growth? So I feel like if you approach it as a growth conversation rather than just about money, you're going to have more success.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Holly, go ahead, Matt.
I like to ask help me understand questions. And if you enter in a yearly review or something like that, it's just and you're sitting with your supervisor or board or whatever, and just say, hey, help me understand, how does this work? What you don't want to do in go out and start looking at all the surveys and all that kind of stuff, because those numbers are all over the place. But if you can just say, help me understand, half the time I don't know that we ever really formalize that is probably the answer. And then
or what can I do? Bring it on yourself. What can I do to impact this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Got one question for Holly and one for Matt here, and then we'll finish up with another kind of special thing that we want to offer you guys since you're a part of the webinar today. Holly, Sue asks, with almost 60% of staff highlighting a need for improvement in evaluation and compensation strategy, what changes should we consider implementing? So this is from somebody that's at the senior staff level, and they're going where we're going to go here in a second. Is okay, so if 60% are saying that we're not doing a good job in both evaluations and compensation planning, where do we start?
Sure. Yeah, I think it feels like a big thing to tackle, especially looking at the stats and everything. Honestly, to start, just making sure you have that process in place. So making sure that you are having that open communication with your team. I think performance reviews, that structure going into them, making sure that you have something in place. You know what questions you're asking, and it's not just a drill down. It's truly sitting down with your team member and you're asking them questions to see how they're doing, what needs they have, how you can be praying for them. And then of course to also be talking about what's going on with their job performance too. It's not this scary performance. Sometimes sounds scary. Oh, it's this intimidation item. It's not that. You're touching base. You're seeing what's going on, but going into it with a set structure of, okay, these are our pay ranges. These are what we can offer our team as far as the PTO. Like Kelly said, it's not just having how much is that base salary, but what can we offer our team that might not cost as much? Can we give them an extra day off? Those types of things. But I think that at some point, sometimes it's also helpful to get some help there too if you're not sure. Kelly talked about pay transparency as well. There's so many factors that go into it too. So that's something that we do offer coaching with that, if that's something that you would be interested in. But I truly think it's just starting from that level of let's get a plan in place and then start having those conversations and start building out how we're going to compensate our team from there.
Yeah. And I would echo what Holly just said. I think the biggest thing is to have a plan. And if you're looking at implementing a once a year plan to give feedback, that's probably not a good plan. You need to be doing feedback throughout the year. If you're going to call it a performance evaluation, that's going to set people on their heels to begin with. The encouragement would be to come up with a plan, but that's why we got the answers that we did, is because most churches just quite simply don't have a plan. All right, last question here, Matt. This one goes to you. Is Kevin says, what's the best, Matt, 2 minutes or less here, because I know this is one of your, you could do a whole webinar on this. As a matter of fact, we need to. Best way to start a conversation about succession planning. If you're a
Call
senior
me.
pastor, how do you do it?
Matt.Steen@chemistrystaffing.com. Yeah. Very carefully. And I don't even mean that tongue in cheek, right? If you're a senior pastor, it's a whole awful lot easier to start that conversation. And it begins with pulling aside some of your trusted board members and just saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. We need to have a conversation about this. If you're a board member, if you're an executive pastor, somebody like that, it becomes a little bit more risky because we have not done a good job in the capital C church about teaching how to do this. And a lot of times where it makes a whole awful lot of sense is just putting together an emergency plan. If somebody gets sick, we'll just leave it at that. We don't need to go into all the other potential, but just putting in an emergency plan where we actually lay out, do we contract with an interim pastor? Do we have a short list of people that can step in the intermediate? Do we have an insurance policy, key man insurance policy, something like that in place? Do we have, you name it, that those types of things I think is where you would start. And the emergency piece, especially if you've got a loan or something like that, a lot of times you can blame the bank or the insurance company. And I strongly recommend throwing somebody else under the bus when you start having this conversation, because it becomes a lot less personal. But if you can start there, then typically the next conversation is maybe we should think about what does succession in general look like with somebody. That's the beginnings of that. There's probably a more context specific conversation that needs to be had. And I'm more than happy to have that conversation outside of this.
So what I heard was call Matt.
Call your boy.
Awesome. All right. So thanks so much for your questions. Sorry we weren't able to get to all of them, but let's close up here. And I want to bring this all together here. So you hear all of this, and maybe you're a senior pastor, you're on the leadership team, executive pastor, you say, so what? The elephant in the room really is, so what is, now that we've, and download that report, you're going to get the full report with all those questions. But now that we know the national averages, what does this really look like for my church? If I'm a senior pastor and I've got 10 people on my staff, or I'm an executive pastor, and I got 5 people on my staff, is some of those 40 and 50% things, is that realistic in my setting? What we've done is we've come up with a way to customize this church staff assessment, not only with the national averages, but also we can come alongside you and partner with you and confidentially with your staff, find out the current feelings of your current staff. And the really cool thing about this is that what we're able to do is we can find out the answers to these 50 questions as answered by your staff. So that's the reality of at least how your staff is feeling. We can also layer on top of that, okay, so here's your staff, here's the national average for this question. And then there's 2 other layers that I think are just incredibly important if you're in senior leadership. The first is we will assess the senior leadership differently. So the way I like to explain it is almost like the Newlywed Game. You remember the Newlywed Game with Bob Eubanks? They would ask the husband a bunch of questions, but they would say, don't answer it the way that you feel. Answer it the way that you think your wife is going to answer it. That's like what we do. That's how we ask the senior pastor and the executive pastor and the senior leadership. We're going to say, for those 50 questions, don't answer them the way that you feel. Answer them the way that you think your church staff is going to feel. And what that's going to do is that's going to show the staff reality, but it's also going to show your perception of the staff and show any possible gaps there. And then another layer on top of, so you've got your local staff, you've got the national averages, you've got the senior pastor, senior leadership team perception. You can also do this with your board. with your elder board, with your church board. And again, it's perceptions. How do we think our staff is feeling? Do we feel like our staff is going to stay for the next 3 years? Do we feel like our staff is happy with their level of compensation? You might feel, and Matt pointed out before, that there's a little bit of a disconnect between senior leadership. Some of the senior leadership who are making those compensation decisions are happy with their compensation because they're the ones making the decision, right? But the youth and the worship and the kids gals may not feel the same way. This local survey will help you deal with kind of some perceptions that may be mismatched, and really, if you're in senior leadership, help you with some blind spots here and there, and help you find some potential blind spots, and help you to kind of plan for your future and to plan what that looks like. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to, on this slide, you can see you can order your local church staff health report. There's a link there, and I'm going to, if I can do all this at the same time, I'm going to publish that as well. You can just click that little get more information button, and it'll take you to that page where you can find out some more information. Also, since you have weathered this webinar with us, we have a promo code for you. If you just type in friend, you get $500 off the discount of the local church staff health report if you order that today. That is, I'm really excited. I was excited to get the national results, but I'm really excited to dig in with a number of you guys in your local churches to help you figure it out. This is the irony, and I think Kelly mentioned this before. I think it was Kelly that mentioned this before. So we're a staffing firm. So we pay our mortgages by churches needing to hire staff people. So it's maybe a little ironic or an oxymoron for a staffing firm to say, we really want you, rather than hire new staff, to build into the staff that you have. Do whatever you can to keep your staff, to make your staff healthy. And I think this local church staff health report could really give you some keen insights into how to do that. And we're here to walk through that with you if you need some help with that as well. You can click on that link. It's just chemistrystaffing.com/health-assessment and engage with one of us on the call. We'll be happy to reach out and talk with you about that if you've got some questions. All right, very good. We're ending right about on time, which is good. Let's do the round robin here. Anything that we didn't say or anything that you'd like to just close out with? Matt, we'll start with you.
Of course you would. I think the major theme here for us, and we didn't touch on this as one of the majors, one of the big things, but I think communication is huge in this, right?
It is.
I think a lot of the talk around job satisfaction, I think a lot of the talk around overall health, I think a lot of the talk around compensation, all of it comes down to how likely are you to have open and honest conversations within your staff team?
Yeah.
If we can crush that, and for the love, we are a communications business, pardon the crassness of that. But our job is to communicate the gospel, love people, and help expand the God's kingdom, right? And so much of that is communication. If we can figure out internal communication, I think we're so much healthier.
Very good. Holly, any parting shots?
Yeah, I think I'm usually optimistic, but I think the biggest takeaway from this is, while some of the stats might be scary and you might go, oh my goodness, which are the 50% that are leaving? I think that it can feel scary, but at the end of the day, just walk away. Even just a small step in the right direction, it's going to be seen and heard by your team. Communicating, having those open, trusting conversations, creating that culture where people feel safe and like they can have those conversations with you. If you're part of the leadership team, those are going to make huge strides. So while it might seem very intimidating, just take one step and you're going to be surprised how quickly your team responds to that in a positive way.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I think it's just about overall church health. That's what our ultimate goal is here, is to help you become a healthier entity, healthier leader, and ultimately a healthier church. And I feel like there are so many ways to do that. If you need help figuring that out, we're happy to jump on a call and help. Maybe your church is really great at the compensation piece, but still you're struggling with staff retention in some ways. There's always going to be sticking points at certain churches, and we all have our uniqueness, but we're the body of Christ and we're here to help. I think it's easier for someone on the outside to see it and help identify things and coach you through that, rather than sitting in the midst of the confusion and chaos and saying, I don't know where to start. So I'll reach out for help. Always find someone you trust, whether it be one of our team members or someone else. And that's a great place to begin. But this at least outlines some areas where you can begin. It gives you a starting place. And Holli said, you just take one step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my parting shot here is just simply this. And I don't know if he needs to hear this today, but leading your church can be a very lonely place to be. If you're the senior pastor or the executive pastor, or you're the worship guy or the youth gal or whatever, it can be lonely. Nobody thinks it's lonely because you're like the leader and you're like in these people, but it can be lonely. And sometimes, particularly when it comes to some of the things that we've talked about today, you just either need somebody to talk to, or somebody that doesn't have a dog in your fight that you need to bounce some stuff off to. And just know that, number one, we're for you. We are on your side. And we're here if and when you ever need us, whether that's a staff search, whether it's like some of the things that we've talked about today. We've got some great church coaches that can come alongside you and your team and kind of help you implement, discover the areas that maybe are stuck, maybe the areas that maybe you need a communication plan, or maybe you need a compensation. You need to see how you're doing with compensation. You don't have to do that alone. We're here to help you. We're not the high level sales organization. We're not going to try and sell you and upsell you everything that you don't need. But at the same time, we're here to help. And we've got some great people on our team that have been in your shoes and can step in and come alongside and assist. So if there's ever any way that we can reach you or help you through any of these things related to staff or church staff health, feel free to reach out to us. You can catch all of us right at our website at chemistrystaffing.com. Okay? So very good. Thank you so much. Any questions about the survey or the assessment or anything, just let us know, and we're happy to help out however we can. Matt, Holli, Kelly, thank you so much. Great to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye.